Jesus. We just praise you, we love you, we thank you, and we honor you, God. And it is your name, amen.
Amen. God bless you. You may be seated. What a lovely crowd it is. My goodness. I'm so excited about what God is doing. As you can see, things are cooking around here, and it'll even get more intense this week. And we're excited about what God is up to. But not just the physical structure, because it's never been about the physical structure or the new building. It's all about what God is wanting to do in you and reaching or using you to reach more people. So we just need to expand the base to help do that. So that's what this is all about. Let me join all of you that are joining us online, wherever from. God bless you. I just want you to know you're seen. We appreciate you tuning in. Please chat with some of our online staff and let them know where you're checking in from. And we're delighted that you're here. One more request would be that you would like and share something that God is doing maybe in this message, and just let that reach out. We've been in a series. Before I go there, let me again mention the upcoming series. Today is the final message in relationship status, and then we will begin a series called Under Construction. And I'm going to contrast the construction of what we're doing here at the harbor with what God is trying to construct in each of our lives. And there are some essential elements to construction, and that makes the building secure, that makes it sturdy and viable and able to withstand pressure and rain and wind and all of that sort of thing. That allows us to come inside that building. And likewise, when God's constructing us as Christians, there's some certain things He has to build into us, and sometimes it just takes a little time. And He's working on us, and so we are under construction. And I want to contrast, if I may, some of what you're going to see physically over the next year with what God is doing over the years in our heart and in our life. And so I'm excited about that. I also want to encourage you to join me tonight at the Golden Isles Church at 6 o'clock. If you take Interstate 95 North off on exit 38, the church is right there on your right, 6 o'clock. We'll have a district rally there. I think Adam's going to be playing the keys. I'll be doing a devotion, but I'm not actually sure who the keynote speaker is, but nonetheless, I'll see you there. I'm excited about it. If you hadn't joined the life group, now's a great time to do it. To dive in. We had a great group this past week, and looking forward to what God is going to continue to do. Today, I want to do this final message on relationship status. We've talked about our relationship with God. We talked about our relationship with our spouse in week 2, and then we talked about our relationship with our children last week. And now, today, we're going to talk about our relationship with others. The whole series has been based on the life of Jacob. I was praying one morning, reading the Bible, and I was in Genesis 28, and I just could not help again and again thinking about the life of Jacob and what he went through. And so the Lord led me to base the entire series on his life. And so today will be no different. It's going to be an amazing conclusion to this. But I want to talk about the relationship status, the final message, and that is my relationship with others. Now, you may feel like I got it going on, man. I got, 7 million friends on Facebook, got a lot of likes on Instagram and all that, but that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. But how do you interact with other people? How do you treat other people? Did you know how we treat others matters? It really does. Jacob's life teaches us that our relationships shape who we are, and that God cares how we treat other people. Whether they are Christian or not, gay or straight, friend, boss, co-worker, neighbor, it matters how we treat them. We never have a right to treat someone like a dog or a doormat, whether or not we agree with them or not. We just don't have that right to treat them in a bad way. Now, I know you're thinking about people who treat others like that, and that's on them. You can't help what they do. All we can do is look in the mirror and talk about what we do. Here's the key question is, how does my treatment of others affect, or no, bad, how does my treatment of others reflect my faith and my character as a Christian? You think about that. The key word for us today is going to be impact. How does my treatment of others impact them? How does it impact my family? How does it impact my boss, my coworkers? So how do I treat them? And so this morning I want to consider the impact that we're making with regards to our treatment of others. And then we've got a passage that Jesus gave us in Luke chapter 6 and verse 31. He said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I read that to somebody one time and they said, well, I thought that said do unto others before they do unto you. I said, no, my friend, you have misread what that said. So the question is, does any of us like being lied to? I don't think so. Does any of us like being slandered or ridiculed or put down, online or otherwise? Any takers? I don't think so. Does anyone, do we like to be stolen from? Or, something, messed up or damaged? Someone come and destroy your property. Nobody wants that to happen, but it does. And then the Bible tells us, however you want to be treated, that's how you ought to treat other people. So if you don't want to be lied to, don't lie to anybody. If you don't want to be lied about or slandered then don't slander anybody else and don't lie to them, and don't steal if you don't want to be stolen from, and don't tear people's stuff up if you don't want people to tear your stuff up. I hope this makes sense. I mean, this is just some basic stuff that Jesus is telling us here. And number one, the first point I'd like to make as we talk about our relationship with others and how we treat others matters is impacting our family. How we treat others. It's impacting our family and the people closest to us. Genesis 27 tells us that Jacob was away from his father and mother for more than 20 years due to broken relationships. And you remember the story. Let me refresh you about this family tree. We have Abraham and Sarah, and they had a son named Isaac, and he married Rebekah. Isaac and Rebekah had Esau and Jacob. And here's where this turmoil starts, where you remember Esau was a man of the red earth, a hairy man, one that liked to hunt wild game, and his father truly loved him more than he loved Jacob. Jacob was a homeboy. He was a dweller among tents. He stayed home. He liked to cook. He had different personalities. If you got different children, you got 3 or 4 children, you got 3 or 4 personalities. One of them liked to hunt and the other one likes to sew. Or so I don't know how it is, but just different personalities. And the Bible says that Rebekah loved Jacob, but Isaac loved Esau. So we have Abraham and Sarah, remember, and then Isaac and Rebekah, and now we have Esau and Jacob. Now we also have talked about Jacob. He married Leah. Well, thought he was going to marry Rachel, and he ended up being Leah. But he had Leah as a wife and Rachel, and then he had Bilhah as Rachel's maid and Zilpah as Leah's maid, so 4 women altogether and 12 sons, and thereby we get the 12 tribes of Israel. Are you with me? And also Leah gave a daughter named Dinah. So that's kind of where we were at. But let's talk about what created this angst to start with. The old man, Isaac, he's getting old, and he tells Esau, he said, son, go kill the wild game like I like. Bring me something to eat. I want to eat and then bless you before I die. Well, Rebekah, Isaac Isaac's wife, Esau and Jacob's mother, she heard that and she says to her favorite boy, Jacob, run out. Esau's gone hunting. It's going to take him a while. Go get a goat, and bring that goat, kill it and dress it, and I'm going to cook it. We're going to just fix it up just like your dad likes it. And then I'm going to send you in there to get your brother's blessing. He said, but Mom, I'm a smooth man and Esau's hairy. You remember? She said, that's all right. Bring me the goat skin too. I'm going to put it on your arms. In other words, we're going to lie to your daddy and deceive him. Mom, can you imagine being involved in this wickedness? And he said, but what if he wants to pull me close? And she said, well, I'm going to go get some of your clothes of your brothers and put them on you. And so, he goes in and he tells his dad, I've got the food. I've killed the game. That was a lie. How many of you know my mom used to tell me, if you tell a lie, you got to tell another lie to prop that one up. You got to tell another lie to prop that one up. He said, I've killed the game. And he said, how'd you find it so quickly? And he said, the God you serve brought it to me. Another lie. Right? And he's even involved God in this. And he said, my goodness. He said, the voice is that of Jacob's, but your hands feel like Esau. Come near and let me smell you. So he pulled him close to him. As he pulled him close to him, because Isaac was blind, he had lost his sight, and he began to smell the clothes of Esau. He said, you smell like Esau, and you feel like Esau, but you sound like Jacob. He said, I'm Esau, and his father blessed him. And that was the firstborn's blessing. Now, I got to understand, watch this. All of the conniving, he didn't have to do that because God had already said the younger is going to rule over the older and the elder will serve the younger. So many times we exhaust ourselves trying to manipulate things, and God says, I've got it worked out anyway. You didn't have to tell the lies. You didn't have to kill the goat. You didn't have to come and say this and that and the other and get all this stuff messed up because I'm on your side. But the problem is, if you don't have communion with God like you ought to have communion with God, you'll think God's not working and you'll jump in and try to fix it yourself. That was free. It wasn't in the notes. But Jacob's selfish action tore his family apart, and he spent 20 years away from them. And so my question to you today is, are you treating your closest relatives with love and respect and honor, or do you take them for granted? Are there things that you're doing that impacts your family negatively? Now, I want you to just tighten your seatbelt a notch so we'll get a little more serious here. Are we holding on to things against our family that we should have long since let go of? They left me out the wheel. So what? I know those things hurt. I get it, but you cannot live your whole life pondering that. You can't live your whole life bogged down because Uncle John didn't leave you a ton of money or a piece of dirt. And I know you say, well, Pastor, you just make it too simplistic. Well, I'll try to go further. Have we withheld love and respect or even affirmation from our family members because we didn't get what we wanted? We didn't get our preference over something petty. Perhaps I didn't get my way. Y'all with me? I do hear the air units running. I just want you to know. Do our words and our actions push our family away or draw them closer to us? There are some things that we just need to let go of. You know what? They have proven that grudges and bitterness has a negative effect on our health. That's right. It's negatively affecting you. You worry and pine away and you get ulcers and just wears you out and creates angst between you and your family and bitterness between them. And then it bleeds into your relationship with your wife and your children. And then you talk about this and that one and the other one. And that shouldn't be. How you treat others matters. Now, we'll go on. And then how do we treat our boss? Uh-oh, now you're meddling, Pastor. How do we treat our coworkers? So, number 2, impacting our bosses and co-workers and those we work with. Now, Jacob went to work for his uncle Laban. Y'all remember how long he worked? He worked 7 years. He worked 7 years for which one? Rachel. And he woke up with Leah. Oh my God, what a trick. I mean, the trickster got tricked. The liar got lied to. The deceiver was deceived. Are you hearing me? So he decided, I'll work 7 more years to really get the one I love, the one I want. The Bible said the one with a beautiful face and a fine figure. I didn't say it. That's what the Lord said. So he worked 7 more years. The first 7, he said it seemed like only a few days. Man, he was in love, right? So he worked another 7 years. How many years is that? That's 14 years. And then his uncle said, you know what? Just because you're family now, you shouldn't be working for free. And so he says, let's make a deal. So he worked 6 more years for cattle. Now, where are we at now? We're at 20 years. Isn't that right? 20 years? So that's a long time to be estranged from Isaac and Rebekah and Esau, all because of me swindling him out of that birthright blessing. And again, it didn't have to be that way because God had already pronounced that he was going to do it that way. Now, so his life was filled with conflict and deception and deceit. Jacob worked these 20 years. Now, I just want to read this to you and follow me as I read Genesis 31, starting in 38, and I'll just kind of browse through here kind of quick. And for 20 years, now this is Laban, his uncle, has caught up to him when he's on his way from Haran back to Beersheba. 20 years has passed by, and he's on his way home. And his uncle, this is when he heard that Esau was coming in front of him and Laban was coming behind him, and they overtook him, and this is the conversation. Jacob said, Laban, for 20 years I've been with you, caring for your flocks, and all that time your sheep and your goats never miscarried. In all those years, I never used a single ram of yours for food. If any were attacked and killed by animals, I'll never show you the carcass, and nor did I ask you to reduce the count of your flock. No, I took that loss myself. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in the broad daylight or in the dark of night. I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through the cold and sleepless nights. Yes, for 20 years I've slaved in your house. I've worked for 14 years earning your 2 daughters and then 6 more years for your flock, and you've changed my wages 10 times. In fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, now see, I told you, God has a way of working this out. You don't have to scheme it. He said, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, that's his grandfather Abraham, his father Isaac. He said, if it weren't for them, you would have sent me away empty-handed. Watch this. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. In other words, he said, I worked in the scorching heat of the day. I was out in the cold of the night. When rams were stolen, I paid for them. When one of them died, I never let you see the carcass of a dead animal. As far as you knew, if you had 600 cows, you had 600. If you had 500 goats, you had 500. I never showed you a loss. I took care of it. He says, that's why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. So the night before, God appeared to Laban and said, don't touch Jacob. Don't say anything harsh to him. God has a way of taking care of us, but we are to treat others with respect. We're to treat others right. Now, I know you don't always get that, and I know from experience, sometimes it's hard to continue to treat them with respect. And let me just go ahead and be honest, Lord, have mercy. I have told people exactly what I thought and was still saved when I got through. And there have been times I told them more than I should have and had to go back and say, I'm sorry. I'm just telling you for me. Now, you're probably more spiritual. And God checked you and you just bit your tongue and didn't say things but I've messed it up a time or two and I had to go back and say, I'm sorry. So how do we handle unfair treatment? You know, in our work ethic, I want you to know it speaks volumes. Are you hearing me? I'll give you an example. I drove a school bus for 13 years. I don't know if y'all know that or not. But one day I had a falling out with a principal. And I won't even tell you what school, but man, he sort of boarded my bus and said a few choice words. And, I thought to myself, I'm the captain of this boat. I told him a few words of my own. You with me? And you could tell who you want to or talk to who you want. I didn't really care because at that time, I didn't have to drive the bus no more. I could walk away. So I wasn't cussing him or nothing like that. Don't get me wrong. But he knew I wasn't happy, and I said some things that, anyway. I'm driving away, and the Spirit of the Lord says to me, tomorrow, you're going to get there early and go find the principal and apologize to him. I said, oh, no, I ain't. So I said, Lord, I'll tell you, the only way I'm going to do it is he standing on the bus port. Principals don't usually work the bus port. That's assistants and teachers and whatever. I drive up there first bus next day. Guess what? There he stands. Lord says, now's your time. I drove right on up there, head hanging down, got off the bus, called him by name, and I said, I got to talk to you. I said, you know what? When you got on my bus yesterday and you said a couple things, and I responded in a harsh way, and it just wasn't the character of who I am. And I just want to tell you I'm sorry. And did you know, he said to me, you are the first person in this line of work that has ever told me something like that. And then I felt good. You know what I'm saying? I felt 10 foot tall and bulletproof when I done what I had ought to do. Now, did we agree on everything? No. But he did have the authority to say what he said. And I just needed to suck it up and do what I needed to do. I didn't feel like it, but I made that thing right. And you know what it's done? It helped my reputation for years, even to this day. Because I could have got my way. I could have been mean-spirited. Anyway, I got to go on. So do we see integrity at work, or do we show integrity at work? Listen, do we honor those in authority, even if we don't agree with them? You know, it blows my mind sometimes how people talk to bosses nowadays. I'm glad I ain't your boss. I'd be fired, some of y'all. Romans says this, 13:1. Everyone must submit to the governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. I know you're saying, hey, I got a caveat. They're talking about government authorities. I got one for you, baby. 1 Peter 2:12, for the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the king is the head of state, he says, or whether the king is the head of state or the official he's appointed, for the king has been sent to punish those who do wrong and to honor those who do right. Paul said, whatever you do, do it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for man. So I just want to tell you, we got to treat people with respect. You know, you don't always have to agree with them, but it is God that causes kings to rise up, whether you agree with them or not, and to sit down. There's been presidents that I didn't agree with, but you know what I still did? I prayed for them, right? I don't agree with their agenda, but I'm still called upon to pray for them. Are you hearing me? There's been local politicians. I don't agree with everything, but I'm called upon to pray for them. That don't mean that you cannot have a different opinion. Doesn't mean you can't protest. But you've still got to have some decorum about you. All right, let me go on. The third thing we'll talk about is how we treat others. It's impacting, what's this, our competitors and those who challenge us. See, Jacob feared meeting Esau because the last time he heard a word from him, he said, I'm going to kill you when daddy dies. 20 years has gone by. He's worried to death now about this competition, you know. Jacob had spent years on the run. See, when we wrong others or step on people to get ahead, it creates tension and regret and fear. But God calls us to reconciliation, not rivalry. Question, are we treating people in our own industry, our own church, or community as rivals or brothers and sisters in Christ? I have a story, and I don't really enjoy telling you this because it really tells on me, but I'm going to tell you anyway because maybe it'll help somebody. I came here in 1995. This August, I'll be here 30 years. When I'd been here about 17 years, Scott Clevenger planted Christ Church, him and I'm not sure who all, but Juan and his wife and Scott and his wife. And I didn't know him from nothing, didn't know him. A new church come to town. We were running about 200 on Sunday if you counted the dogs and cats and the pregnant women twice. Right? So when Scott come to town, you know, they meet in their homes, and then they met in the rec center, and they went from like 3 families to 5 to 10 to 20 to 30. Then they bought the old Methodist church across from Walmart, and with some elbow grease, I mean, they just began, they were blowing and going. Next thing you know, they're over 100, then over 200, 300, 400, 500. They had over 500 on Easter, and I'm thinking, man, they have passed me like a quarter horse passing a jackass. And I thought to myself, my God, what is wrong with me? I've been doing this stuff at this church 18 years, not to mention 5 years before. And so, man, they were blowing and going. 200, 300, 400. Had over 1,000 on Easter, and I'm thinking, oh my God. And then, you know, just every time. And so I said to my wife and Adam, might have been Josh, never would I have said this to the church. But I said, man, ain't no way they doing church right. I said, man, they probably running around, drinking, sleeping around. Now, I would have never said that out here. That was just between me and my wife. You ever have a conversation that you have with your wife, you don't have nobody else, right? That's what me and her are saying. And Adam, who is my worship pastor, and Josh, I would have never said that out here. But I was thinking, man, that just ain't right. There's no way you doing church right, and you got this big old crowd of people. And now people talk about me the same way. But I went to pray, and the Lord spoke to me and said, why are you talking about my servant like that? And I'm talking about your servant? There ain't no way, man, they're doing this thing right. And God just says to me, why are you talking about my servant like that? I want you to call him, take him to lunch, and apologize for what you said. Kind of like the bus driving thing. I ain't learned my lesson or something, right? I said, Lord, that's a bridge too far. I didn't tell the church that. I didn't put it on Facebook. I didn't write no articles against the church. But every time I went to pray, all I could hear was call Pastor Scott, take him to eat, and apologize to him. And it's almost like, I'm not going to bless nothing else you put your hand to do until you make things right. So reluctantly, I come to the office one day, and I told my secretary, please call and see if Scott is available for lunch today. Hoping he wouldn't be. He's pastoring that big old church, surely he's busy. Oh, yeah, I can meet you. I can meet him at Sonny's. So she tells me, oh, he can meet you at Sonny's at noon. I'm like, great. So I go to Sonny's. I go in, get the table, and he comes in. First thing I notice, he's wearing a Timex watch that is royal blue, the exact same watch I've got on. I thought it was a coincidence. I sat down and I start talking about our history, and he says he was an Air Force veteran. I said, well, lo and behold, I'm an Air Force veteran. So we start talking, and I'm thinking, well, maybe this ain't so bad until God nudges me and says, now tell him why you're here. And I didn't really want to get into that. I was thinking that maybe I could just buy him lunch and God would be okay with that, but it didn't work that way. And so I said, Scott, the reason I'm here, I owe you an apology. He said, man, how do you owe me an apology? We never even met. So I said, well, you come to town. I said, I've been here 17, 18 years. On a good Sunday, man, we got 200 people if we count the dogs and cats and pregnant women twice. I said, you come to town, man, and blow in and blow up and just boom, everything you touch turns to gold. Man, you rented the whole aquatic center to baptize people. And now we do that occasionally and sometimes go to the ocean and, stuff like that. But I was like, I don't want to think I was jealous, but maybe I was. But I told God what it is I want the kingdom to grow under my leadership the way I'm seeing there. Now, we have some theological differences, but that aside, I said, Scott, you come to town and everything touched turned to gold. I mean, it's just crazy, man. And I said, I was talking to my wife one day, and I said, we was talking about the church, and I said, that just ain't no way God's blessed. I said, they just can't be doing what's right. They probably drinking and running around, and he started laughing. And he looked up at me and said, Mike, who's your coach? And I looked back at him as surely as I'm looking at you, and I said, Pastor, we ain't playing football. This is church work. And he said, all the more the reason you need a coach. And he introduced me to Nelson Searcy, and he said, you need to join, if you can get in it right now, his coaching network. And he told me a book to read, and before I left the parking lot, I called Tanya to order this book, and she ordered a book, and I'm scouring this book, and I began to read through that. I tore through every page twice. And I just began to learn the consistency, because when I grew up in the church, they told me if you just preach, pray, and love people, the church will grow. And it will until you're doing all that you could possibly do. And I was busier than a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest. You with me? I was pretty busy, ain't it? People were coming in the front door and going out the back door. And I said, Lord, help me to learn the systems of the church. Help me to learn how to connect people. Help me to learn the stewardship system. Help me to learn the volunteer system and the leadership system. And God, help me to learn how to strategize and how to plan. And see, because all we did, we just planned for what I was going to preach Sunday. Then you didn't have to worry about it the next Friday night. And then that just don't work that way. And so what I said, several years later, God had blessed the church. We were running 450 or maybe even 500 by that time. And I heard that Scott was leaving. He was going to Pensacola to start another church. And I happened to be in Longhorn that day and had some of my staff with me. And I walked up to him and I looked him in the eyes and I said, Scott, he said, hey man, today's my last day. I said, I know. I said, but I want to take a moment and just say thank you. He said, what do you mean? I said, I want to say thank you for coming to Camden County and making me feel uncomfortable as a pastor and challenging me to grow myself. Now the church runs 450 or so. It was still a fraction of them at that time. But I said, we are in large part today where we are because of you coming here and challenging me and the meeting we had at Sonny's. And it was tough, man. That's tough to go. But God used that. So what I'm saying is, there may be somebody in the same business you do. Here's the thing. I don't worry about it anymore. Someone says, well, this church is coming, that church is coming. Here's the deal. God has called me to be me. And it took a long time to learn that. And people can say what we say or preach what we preach or sing what we sing, but they'll never be us. God called us to reach the people that we reach. And I'm going to tell you, there's enough lost in this county to fill every church 10 times. That's a fact. And so now I learned this, that we are on the same team. And though we have some differences that, we don't all agree theologically sitting in the house right now, I'll guarantee you. But there's a couple things that we are majored in, and that is that Jesus is the only begotten Son of the Father, born of the Virgin Mary, lived and died and rose again, is seated at the right hand of the Father, making intercession for us, that he is coming again one day to receive us unto himself, that where he is, there we may be also, and spend eternity with him in heaven. So Jacob learned that genuine relationships require humility and reconciliation. So we all make mistakes, but true friends, watch this, they forgive and they restore. And you are no exception. None of us, we don't have a caveat for me and you or whatever. If I refuse to forgive, or if you refuse to forgive, we cannot be forgiven. And that is why bitterness begins to grow and take root in our heart. You hear how quiet it is? You see, you can't help what somebody does to you. And there's people that's going to step on you on their way to the top. I get it. That's just a fact of life. Life is not fair. Sometimes somebody else got the promotion that you deserved, it seemed. But you don't realize that God's just allowed you to take a detour, and he'll do something better, and you'll come back around, right? So you got to understand that God was working for Jacob the whole time. He's trying to scheme it and make sure I'm rich and make sure I'm here and make sure I'm there. And he says, and God says, you don't have to do that. Just submit to me, and I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. So let me ask you this question. Are we loyal friends, or do we lift up or tear down the people that God has placed in our lives? Number 5, how we treat others, it's impacting the lost and the hurting and those who need hope. Genesis 45, Joseph forgave his brothers and saw God's purpose in the pain. If anybody had a right to be bitter, I suppose Joseph did. Because he saw the favoritism. He looked up line and saw favoritism. It happened in his grandparents toward his daddy. He saw that favoritism by Rebekah to Jacob and by Isaac to Esau. And then he began to live it out. They lived it out even further. Isaac just doted Jacob just doted on Joseph. He just loved on him, made him a coat of many colors, and the lesson was not learned. And so his brothers captured him and sold him to Egyptians and told his daddy that he was killed by a wild animal. Here's the similarities between the two stories, between Joseph and Jacob, his father. Both of them spent 20 plus years away from their families because of not being able to reconcile differences. You with me? I know people that have spent years, decades apart, that hadn't said one word to their families over a half acre of land. Are you kidding me? Over a few dollars. I'm going to tell you something that I learned a few years ago. I had some folks that owed me some money. And you know what I decided to do? I just decided to forgive it. And so, you know what? I ain't going to let it eat me up no more. I'm just done with it. I told Kelly, I said, you know what? I've resolved that I just forgive it completely. Never bring it up to them again, ever. As far as I'm concerned, it was a gift. And you know what I do? I sleep better and I walk around better. I'm not bitter about it. That's just where I'm at. Now, I don't know, that might not work with you, but here's what I know. You cannot walk around with bitterness and unforgiveness against somebody else and then expect God to forgive you. Let me show you this. Jesus said, let your light so shine that they'll see it and glorify, or see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So let me ask you this. Do you treat people as they deserve, or do you treat them with grace and mercy? This is kind of a bonus here, but I'm going to say it anyway. Because how we treat others is also impacting the atheist and the skeptic. Think about those who are not believers. They're not believers. Those who challenge our faith, those people that you would just like to knock them out. Because you've seen people that don't understand common sense. Common sense. I know it's not a flower that grows in everybody's garden anymore. But you'll never win a skeptic or an atheist or an agnostic by arguing with them. You'll never go. There is no end of that. But I'll tell you what you do. When you live out a life of faithfulness, when you just live out the Christian, just like I'm saying at work, when you just live it out in front of them and you live the Christ life, they're going to know something is different about you. In Genesis 41 and 38, Pharaoh was a pagan king. Pharaoh was a pagan ruler. He didn't know God, but you know what he did? He showed love and respect to Joseph, who had been imprisoned by Potiphar. You know why? Joseph lived a life. He was forgotten by the butler after he was restored to his position. They forgot him. And then time went by and he spent 2+ years in a prison for a crime that he did not commit. But God was working things, and in the process of time, the Pharaoh dreamed the dream. He didn't understand the interpretation, and the butler said, "Oh, I remember, my Lord, when you were angry with me and you had imprisoned me. There's a guy in prison named Joseph. He told the baker that in 3 days he would be impaled and executed, and that in 3 days I would be restored," and put the king's cup back in his hand. And as sure as it happened, 3 days you killed him, and 3 days I was restored. And he said, "Go to the prison and get him now." They brought him back. I want to tell you something. When you just live out the life in front of them, see, our lives and our actions speaks louder than our words. Joseph didn't argue with Pharaoh about God. He just lived in such a way that an unbeliever saw God's presence in him and made him in charge of everything except executive decisions about the crown. What I'm saying is God has a way of exalting you even in a foreign land. So do we have to argue to prove our point? Do we have to live in such a way? We got to live in such a way they see Jesus in us. Jesus said this, "By this everyone will know that you're my disciples if you have love one for another." So here's the deal. As I conclude this thing, the legacy, there is a legacy that's going to impact people based on watching your life. Jacob's relationships were messy. By the end of his life, he had learned some powerful lessons. Pharaoh asked him, "How old are you?" And Jacob said, "My years have been few and difficult." Because the Pharaoh met Jacob and Joseph, because Jacob still lived in Israel. And when the Pharaoh finally met Joseph, Egypt paid for him to go home and carry caravans and bring all 70 of his family from Israel back down there. And then he gave them the best land in Egypt, the land of Goshen. God has a way of looking out for us. And final question is, how will we remember? How will people remember our relationships? Will we leave a legacy of conflict or love, forgiveness or faith? As you stand with me, I want to ask you just a few questions. And this is a call to action. First of all, you might be here and say, "Wow, this is a tough message, Pastor." And it is, I know. It wasn't easy to go back to that bus port and talk to that principal. It wasn't easy to talk to that pastor. But your pastors had to live it. I'm not telling you to do something that I hadn't done myself. So, big question right now with heads bowed and eyes closed. Is there someone that you need to forgive? Is there something that you, perhaps yourself, need to say, "I'm sorry" about? Is there someone that you need to encourage? Who do we need to show through our actions Christ? See, our relationship will reflect our relationships will reflect our relationship with God. And we need to choose to honor Him. But here's what I want to ask you. You might be here first and say, "You know, I got some work to do." But you don't know how to do it. Maybe you're here and you don't even have your own life right with the Lord. So let's deal with that first. If you're here and you say, "Pastor Mike, I want to make sure my own life is right with God." And you say, you might be saying, "Pastor, you know, I don't know about I have to forgive." Well, let me tell you what the Word says. Jesus, His disciples asked Him, "Teach us to pray." And He said, when you pray, pray like this: "Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." In other words, God's going to forgive you just like you forgive them. "And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory." I'll tell you what Jesus did. When He was beaten severely with a cat of nine tails and laid down on a cross and nailed hands and feet, as a Roman soldier drove the nails in his hands, Jesus looked him in the eyes and said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." And I just wonder if you're here today and you say, "Pastor Mike, I'm not sure that my own life is right with God." Or maybe you've never given your heart to Jesus Christ and you want to do that right now. Would you just slip your hand up right where you are? Say, "Pastor, pray for me." God bless you. I'll wait. Somebody else, God bless you, sir. And lady in the back, and another in the back on the left, the middle. God bless you. 4, 5, 6 hands have gone up. Somebody else? God sees your hand. You know, you don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to be ashamed. Jesus said, if you're ashamed to confess me before men, I'll be ashamed to confess you before my Father. This is the greatest decision you'll ever make in your life, to make things right with God. So I want to take care of that first. And so if you've raised your hand across this auditorium, I want you to pray with me right now. Simply this: Jesus, I surrender all to you. Come into my heart. Save my soul. Be the Lord of my life. I trust you with my life and with my heart. And I believe that you are the Son of God, and I confess that now. Therefore, according to your word, I am saved. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Now, that's amazing right there. It's the greatest thing that could have happened today. But maybe you're here and you love God. You've been serving God. But you need to say, I'm sorry to somebody. Maybe you're like your pastor, and somebody in your industry, somebody in your own business seems to be doing it further, faster, better, more contracts, more work, expanding, on it goes. And you can't think a good thought about them. I want to tell you something. You're better than that, and God can heal that. God can heal it. There's enough people here that need what you do. God can bring it, or He can give you another concept and catapult you to even greater things. You show the love of God. I promise you, you will never regret it. You show the love of God. So if you need to repent right now, just do that. If somebody's face is coming before you and you need to, just like I did, go to them sometime today or tomorrow, the next day, and say, I need you to forgive me. I promise you on all that is holy, when you do that, God will turn your situation around. So if you need to say, I'm sorry, you just work up the courage to get, what you got to do is swallow pride. You got to get you out of the way and say, you know what? I don't care what I look like. I'm going to say I'm sorry. And I'm going to do this the right way. And I promise you, God will go before you. Perhaps you need to do that. Maybe you got to apologize. Or maybe you just need to forgive someone that asked you 2 years ago. And you just like, no, I'm going to hold them in this prison because they did me wrong. And maybe they really did. Right now, today, it's over. It's over. You got to forgive them. You got to let it go. And you're not releasing them from the prison. You're releasing yourself from the prison. But you got to let it go. Praise team's going to sing something right now. And as they sing, I want you to just pour your heart out.
Hi, my name is Jessica Armstrong, and on behalf of the Harbor Worship Center, we want to personally thank you